What's up everybody, blessed be, my name is Mannun and you're watching Witch in the Working, where we will be discussing all things witchy in and around, throughout and about, above, below, and beyond. Every one of us came into the craft in one way or another, whether it was through family members, friends, something you came across on the internet that piqued your interest and caused you to delve into the wild, mysterious world of the occult. It could have been any one of an infinite circumstances and events that steered you to this exciting path to walk on, and walk on it you did, as every journey begins with that first step. Well, this is my journey and my story. Roll intro. Welcome back everyone. So as I just stated before the intro, I thought I would use this episode to relax a little bit and tell you all my story as to how I became the witch I am today. The holidays are just around the corner, and during these darker times of the year, it always feels nurturing and cozy to tell these life stories and experiences and share them with friends and family as a sort of heart-to-heart and energy exchange, so to speak. So without further ado, I'll get into reminiscing. As a child, I grew up in a home without religion. This being said, it was very easy for me to transition into a pagan faith, as unlike many others in this world, I really didn't have anything to transition from. In essence, Wicca was and is my first and only faith-based system I've ever known. Once when I asked my dad what religion he placed his faith into, he basically told me that he believed that we were all created by aliens that mixed us with apes. His philosophy was that these aliens are a very fragile being when it comes to mingling with our Earth's atmosphere, and they're basically trying to create a sturdier species for themselves to be able to inhabit Earth. Hence, we are that experiment and the product, I guess the ongoing product, so to speak, no less. I guess he was trying to say that ultimately they're doing their best to make a species that has their brains but our bodies. As a child, I was always fascinated by the occult, which was mostly trimmed down to scary games such as Light as a Feather and Bloody Mary, along with occasional dabbling with a Ouija board with my sister and cousins on card night my parents would always host. It wasn't until I was 16 years old and had just started driving when I met and somehow survived my first encounter with a group of peoples that dabbled with the occult at best. So through a friend of a friend, I was invited to attend a party being hosted in this sketchier part of downtown Fort Lauderdale. Upon arriving, I was swiftly introduced to numerous very gothy fellow teens. Yes, the goth community even existed back in the 80s, in which I was nothing of the sorts myself, and at the time had felt they were a pretty weird group of kids, but I was open-minded and quickly settled in for a night of gallivanting and chaos, so to speak. This house was owned by a family that was supposedly transitioning to another house, leaving this particular residence completely gutted, save for one room which remained occupied by a teenage girl who remained there awaiting her parents, supposedly, to come get her and her stuff. I know I'm older now and I see all of the flaws in that story, but I didn't at the time. I just thought, oh my God, how cool your parents are for leaving you unattended to party your ass off whenever you want. And on top of that, you don't even have to go to school. You know, I mean, geez, you're like the luckiest person in the world. So while at this party, these kids would be discussing witchcraft and other occult practices, but for the most part, I kept hearing about the Necronomicon, something about the Mad Arab, and of course, a lot of satanic Bible type references. Did this make me uneasy? Not so much. I was a pretty confident teenager and again, quite open-minded, so I just spent my evening listening and trying my best to decipher this new system of mystery and fascination I'd been dragged into. So just as I was getting comfortable with my newfound acquaintances, I heard someone mention that Mandrake would be making an appearance in just a few minutes. So I was like, Mandrake, is this some kind of like mixed drink or something? What the hell is that? In which I was met with the answer, you mean who in the hell is that? Come to find out, Mandrake, Ken, was a 32-year-old male who was living living in this shithole of a house, in essence acting as a sort of high priest to all of these underage children. Now, back then, I even saw something not right in this situation, but nonetheless, the situation was real. Mandrake steps out of the one room I was not allowed into because I thought it was this young girl's bedroom and basically off limits for reasons of typical privacy, but now I began to realize it's also this dude's hideout until he's ready to make his mystical appearance before his teenage followers. So Mandrake steps out dressed in black pants, black boots, figure knee-high, no shirt, with a black cape lined red on the inside. Oh, and of course, fake vampire fangs that he claims are real teeth he was born with, but also, he had a birthmark on his arm shaped like a typical caveman's club that was right here that he tried desperately to pass off as a birthmark showing the number 6. It looked nothing like the number 6, but whatever. Anyways, he walked over to me as I was the newbie young mind awaiting impregnation with his lines of falsity and bullshit and introduced himself. Now, this was as comical as could be to begin with, as he had obviously just created this Mandrake name recently because all the kids kept randomly forgetting and calling him Ken left and right, in which he would sigh and give a look of desperate disapproval only to receive a response of, oh shit, wait, I mean Mandrake. So Ken decided to tell me a mixture of tales that he claimed as factual from the Necronomicon, the Satanic Bible, and whatever books of witchcraft he'd read. After about an hour of a handful of teens swooning over this psychotic idiot and me listening to his nonsense, he took me by the hand, looked me in the eye, and he said, I feel you have a special power within you. It's very strong and we can totally use you in this coven. I pulled my hand away, non-threateningly, stood up and stated, that's the power of Jesus Christ, my friend, and went on with the rest of my evening, much to the disgust of Ken that he couldn't convert me to his insane parlor of brainwashed youngsters. Now, just so you know, I held no stock in Jesus Christ. I just knew that this guy most definitely did not want to hear those words, and I wasn't really educated on anything witchcraft at this time in my life, so it's all I could think of. If I could go back 30 years knowing what I know now, I would have schooled this moron and had him arrested, as I'm sure there was some crazy shit going on in that house that wasn't legal, including underage child exploitation. So what became of Ken? Ultimately, somehow the other kids began to see his weaknesses and his bullshit, and he was kicked to the curb and left town, which again was unfortunate because who knows where he ended up to pull the same shit with other children. He should be in jail, but nonetheless, this was my first experience with the occult world at large, even though it wasn't a very positive one, and for that fact had nothing to do with the occult as we know and love it today. The positive about this is that it led me to meet and befriend some amazing kids that were very much into what the occult really was, and in fact, I remain friends with a few of these people today. So I really didn't hang out with these kids very much, as I just wasn't into that sort of thing or the goth scene, so to speak. So from time to time, I would hang out a few times a year at a party or two, but that was about it. Religion and the occult were the furthest things from my mind at this time in my life. When I was 18 years old, I had just graduated high school and landed a job working as a bouncer in a game room in Miramar, Florida, just outside of Miami. I know what you're thinking. A bouncer in a game room. This was no typical arcade, and yes, indeed, it needed bouncers. 3 to be exact, which I was just one, and fights occurred quite regularly, mostly between teenagers getting pissed off at each other over Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter. But yep, it happened, and at times it was quite ugly, but you know. Anyways, out of the blue, I can't explain it. All of a sudden, I started having and experiencing an extreme want, need to explore the mysteries and secrets of the occult. I didn't know what in the occult, just that I had a longing to read and nurture myself with something. I felt like something was missing, and I knew enough about the occult world to know that I wanted to dabble within its circles, but I didn't really know even where to start. There was no internet back then. Hell, there wasn't even cell phones really yet that weren't the size of a briefcase. The big thing around that time was beepers. So I immediately reached out to one of my friends that I'd met back during the Mandrake experience. I called her up on the phone and I asked her if I could borrow a few books on something, anything occult. After a little bit of convincing that I was being serious and not picking on her, I drove over to her boyfriend's house and she gave me a few books, which were Mastering Witchcraft by Paul Husson, The Meaning of Witchcraft by Gerald Gardner, The Necronomicon Necronomicon by, I believe, Lovecraft, and The Golden Dawn by Israel Regardie. I wasn't interested in the Necronomicon. Golden Dawn looked way too intimidating, and The Meaning of Witchcraft was such a dry read, I fell asleep 3 times I tried to read it within 3 pages. This left the lucky winner, Mastering Witchcraft by Husson. This book is very interesting and isn't exactly something I would recommend for beginners, as a lot of it's quite, well, let's just say nonsense. Not all of it, but quite a bit of it. However, the book is a complete blast to read, and it spiked my interest and curiosity even more. So I went out, started collecting my craft tools of the trade, which was so exciting as a young occultist, and I painted all of my magical symbols on them as instructed by Husson's book. I also located an amazing little store only a few miles from my house called Magical Forest, which was run by one Lady Kara, whom I would be very close to coming up in the near future. That store was my home base for the next at least 10 years of my craft life. Every paycheck I was there buying books, herbs, oils, knickknacks, tools, and everything you could possibly think of crafty and witchy. I started working with a couple of spells. My very first one was the money spell of an old gray witch, shown in the video above, and linked in the description below. It wasn't long at all, and I was very interested in performing some of the rituals I was reading about, in particular the full moon rite and maybe even a Sabbath that corresponded to the nearest of my seasonal time frames at the moment. The spell work wasn't so bad, and I had an amazing experience doing some of these, dancing my way through them, learning via trial and error. However, the rituals I just wasn't feeling all by my lonesome. I placed another call to my friend and asked her if she'd be interested in doing some of these rituals with me. Again, after much convincing and promising that I wasn't just picking on her, and she grabbed a couple of her friends and came over to my makeshift circle in the center of my bedroom, and we worked a full moon rite. So from here, I began hanging out with these once thought weirdos, and we all became very good friends. My room wasn't quite private enough and frankly very small to have a circle in it though. I began to fantasize though about doing our rituals in the woods. Luckily, we have the entirety of the Florida Everglades system just a few miles from my house. I grabbed a friend with a couple of ATVs and off we tracked and located a nice circle area out in the middle of nowhere to find and create a sacred space. It wasn't long and I was drawn to the perfect spot, far enough off the main highway to be secluded, but near enough that we could drive to the generalized area and carry any gear we would need to the circle area. I spent the next couple of weekends clearing a circle spot and bringing an altar table, a picnic table, a small grill, and garden fencing to mark out the boundary of the circle area. The altar table was the hardest thing as it was one of those big wooden spools that cabling comes on, and it was extremely heavy, but me and a few others managed to roll it down the trail that we had made and we got it placed. This became my small group of friends' sacred area for the next 10 years. We would go out there every Sabbath and celebrate along with an occasional full moon ritual thrown in from time to time. We'd go out on Friday evening after work and camp until Sunday when we'd return home exhausted from the weekend and the magic. The name of my coven back then was called Children of the Dancing Moon, and it was truly amazing times that I'll never forget. And the experiences and things we learned and discovered will be in my heart and carry with me in my life forever. So tracking back to the store I mentioned, Magical Forest, the first Monday of every month they would have a Wicca 101 class from 8 to 9 p.m. We would attend this religiously every class, anxious and perked for new information and to learn something we may have not realized. I would always ask questions and challenge the speakers, and that many times disagree with certain things and tell them why. There was always a sign on the front door of the store that said, if you're interested in witchcraft and wanted to join a coven, read these 3 books and write a letter to this P.O. Box address, and turn, a Lady Kara would get back to you and maybe give you an interview to join a coven. I got to know the patrons and the store owner Eileen very well. It turned out that Lady Kara was Eileen, and she was a Gardnerian witch to be exact. A lot of these people that I had gotten to know actually were this edgy, secretive, and very orthodox form of Wicca called Gardnerian. I looked up Gardnerian Wicca and realized right away that there was some practices within its system that I did not agree with. For instance, working skyclad, a hierarchy system, working skyclad, a system of initiation. It was a mystery tradition and very secretive. Oh yeah, and did I mention working skyclad? This was definitely not the system for me, mostly because, if you haven't caught on yet, of the working skyclad. There was no way on Goddess's green earth I was gonna be practicing naked in a circle with a bunch of people staring at my naked body. And I was always being asked by some of these Gardnerians if I was interested in joining their Gardnerian coven, in which I would respectfully tell them no thank you and explain why with a pride and attitude as if what they were doing was an outrage and just inappropriate. I was happy as an eclectic practicing in the Everglades from time to time. Soon, Lady Kara asked me if I would teach the 101 class every other Monday to get a perspective from an eclectic point of view. I gladly accepted and ended up teaching quite a few classes before her store ultimately had to pack up and move to a new location, in which the 101 classes sadly came to an end. I would always purchase tickets to a Beltane and a Samhain gathering that these Gardnerians held every year, but I would never go because, again, we thought if we went, we would have to be naked in front of whomever was attending. Plus, it was a travel of about 3 hours and I just wasn't feeling it, plus the hotel rental, etc., etc., Well, one day, as it would happen, I was forced to go. Some of my friends decided that we were going no matter what, and my bags were literally packed for me when I got home from work, and they were sitting waiting for me whether I liked it or not. So very reluctantly, off I went. We met some of the most amazing, loving, sensitive, open-minded, awesome people I've ever experienced in my life. My really good witchy friend and mentor, Diana, was there too. In fact, she was high priestessing the ritual. She introduced us to a lot of amazing witches and helped guide us around and know what was what and where was where, etc. By the end of the weekend, me and my friends had picked out about 7 people out of the 235 that were attending this festival and labeled them as Gardnerian witches because of their staunch attitude and their holier-than-thou ways about them. They were definitely these conceited Gardnerians we were not interested in at all. Aside from our good friends, Diana and Lady Kara, they were cool and normal. I mentioned this to Diana. I said, yeah, we know who the guards are around here. And she said, really? Honey, show me who these assholes are. So we pointed them out and she said, oh, that's very interesting. She said, yep, they are definitely Gardnerian. But what do you think about the other 228 people that are attending this festival? We said they're amazing and we made so many great friends and that they know so much and that we learned so much and it's amazing and we definitely want to come back to the next ones. Diana said, oh, well that's great because just so you know, the 5 of you are the only people out of the 235 in attendance that are not Gardnerian. So at that point, we began to realize that maybe these people weren't all that bad after all. The 5 of us thought about it on the way home from the campgrounds we were at for the festival and quickly decided we were gonna join the ranks of the Gardnerian Wiccan practice. After confirming with Lady Kara that the Skyclad issue is definitely a reality and something that we would definitely have to do after our first year and a day of outer court practice, where you actually wear a robe, we joined with Lady Diana's coven, Path of the Sacred Grove. From here, after my robed outer court practice of a year and a day, I took my first degree initiation as an initiated first degree Gardnerian witch. A year and a day later, I was elevated to second degree, and a year and a day after that, third degree. I quickly started my own coven called Path of the Sacred Pinnacle, and since have put off 10 third degree Gardnerian witches myself and have been through 5 cycles of coveners over the last 20 years. To this day, I still run a coven as a magus and high priest and continue to spin off third degrees to those willing to take on the responsibility. My life is witchcraft, as I believe my lives before this one were the same. I believe that the people I know and love in this lifetime I have known and loved for many lifetimes. I believe in teaching and sharing with others every chance I get, and I believe I have been a teacher in my past lives. I also believe in learning and experiencing from others, especially my students, and again I believe this has been for many lifetimes, all the way up to the one I'm currently experiencing. Well, that's my story, people. That's how I came into the craft this time around. How did you find the craft or whatever occult practice you currently are walking? Please let us know in the comments below. Click that subscribe button and ring that bell to be reminded of future episodes to come. I love you guys and gals. Blessed be, and I'll see you next week.